Hello and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever. I am back. Don't worry, I didn't leave you. I am trying my best to stick to a consistent schedule on making videos, which I didn't used to do, but it's my first video of the new year. I am at least a couple days late to wishing everyone a happy new year, but it's 2022, and 2022 is the year that I do nothing different from any previous years. But today I'm going to talk about writing dialogue because in my last video I made a promise, a pinky swear. It wasn't actually a pinky swear, but I made a promise to make a video talking about writing dialogue. And as always, this is mostly pertains to fiction writing because that's what I'm good with. So let's get going. I have some tips on how to improve your skill with writing dialogue, and let's just get right into it. First up, learn the grammar of dialogue. There are grammatic rules to how dialogue is written and structured, and the better you get with those, the more readable your dialogue will be. It can be a little difficult and a little tricky to get the hang of all the grammar rules around dialogue because there are quite a few, but once you get used to it, it kind of just becomes second nature. And just learn the grammar of dialogue. It makes it easier to read, and the easier it is to read, it's better. It's better if it's easy to read. Next, make a new paragraph every time someone new speaks. Please, I am literally on my knees begging you, please, just hit enter and then tab over. Just make a new paragraph every time a new character talks. Please, it is not that hard. I see this so much, especially in online fiction writing, where people just... It's a whole long paragraph of like 5 different characters speaking, and it is so hard to read. It's so jarring because you get to a point and you're like, I don't know who's talking anymore. Just make a new paragraph every time someone talks, please. It will just make it read and flow so much better. Please. The next tip. Said is not dead. If anyone has ever told you said is dead, they were lying. You can use the word said in a dialogue tag. That is perfectly fine. It is not illegal. Anyone who says they repeatedly saying said over and over again, it gets boring and repetitive. They're lying to you, okay? You can use said. Don't go for like super ridiculous over the top. Like, don't pull out the thesaurus every time you write dialogue and open the book and be like, I wonder which synonym for said I can use this time. Because first of all, they are not all interchangeable. You would not use like shouted in the same context that you would use whispered for a dialogue tag, you know? It's perfectly fine to use said. For the most part, when you're reading, you don't even really register the dialogue tags. For the most part, they're only there to tell you which character is speaking. When I'm reading a story, I don't really pay much attention to the dialogue tags at all. I just try to focus on which character's speaking so I can like picture in my head correctly. In some circumstances, it is perfectly fine to use other dialogue tags. For example, asked if someone is saying a question, or responded if they're answering something, or whispered if that's what fits how they're speaking. But for the most part, said is totally fine. Don't worry if you feel like you're overusing it. I promise you, you're not. Use different dialogue tags if you want one applicable, but don't go over the top. It can get very ridiculous. And the next tip, in a similar sort of category as the previous one, you don't necessarily always need to use dialogue tags every time someone speaks. And this is a little bit of a specific sort of thing, but for example, if 2 characters are having a back and forth exchange or a conversation and it's the same 2 characters talking the entire time, you don't need a dialogue tag every single time one of them speaks. Once you've established the order in which they're speaking, you can get rid of the dialogue tags entirely, and your readers, for the most part, as long as they remember the order, they'll know which character is speaking. The next tip, don't have your characters say too much at once. And what I mean is, don't have a single character go on for paragraphs at a time talking about pretty much anything, because that gets tedious, it gets boring, and it gets very hard to read. In some circumstances, for example, if a character is giving a speech or something like that, or they're giving a lot of exposition at once and it's been established that that is appropriate for the moment in the story, then you can do that. And just a little tip, if you have a character whose dialogue goes for more than 1 paragraph, every time you start a new paragraph, you don't need a quotation mark at the end of the last one, but you do need one at the start of the next paragraph. I'm sure you get what I mean by that. You've probably seen it somewhere in a book. But for the most part, don't have just uninterrupted paragraphs of a single character talking. With different characters, like multiple characters in the same scene that are having a conversation, it's a little bit different, but this isn't the Odyssey. You're not Homer. You're not going to get away with having a single character going on for pages and pages at a time. And once again, similarly to the last tip, mix dialogue with narration or action. So even if it is multiple characters having a conversation with each other in the same scene, you don't necessarily just have to have it all be dialogue. You can have them doing other things at the same time, and in fact, that's probably a better thing to do, especially if it's a conversation going on for multiple pages of the story. So that way it just doesn't start to feel like repetitive and boring, and the reader doesn't start to feel like, okay, when is the action going to start again? Like, when are they just going to stop talking? Next up, make sure your characters don't all speak the same way, because even in real life, people don't do that. People don't all speak exactly the same way, and this can be a little hard to get the hang of, but it gets a little bit easier the more you develop your characters and the more clearly you can hear their voices in your head. So you don't want them all to be speaking exactly the same way, and also you don't want really anyone to be speaking like a textbook, because people don't speak like a textbook, and unless it's like specific to the character, generally you don't want to have any of your characters speaking like overly formally at any point, unless that's just how they talk, and that can be a part of their personality and the character themselves and that sort of thing. Next tip is to read your dialogue out loud, and this can be very awkward. Trust me, some people are not used to hearing the sound of their own voice, but it can really help if you just take sections of dialogue that you've written and read it out loud to yourself. Do like different inflections and voices for the different characters. It can help you figure out if any part of the dialogue feels strange or unnatural, and especially in exchanges between multiple characters, it can help you figure out if any of your characters are speaking too similarly to each other, or if they all sound the same, or if just something sounds off. It can really help to read the dialogue out loud to yourself, and you can pinpoint, this is what I need to change, like that sort of thing. And finally, the last tip I have is to understand that dialogue is tricky. It can be one of the hardest things when it comes to writing stories, and you have to accept that you're going to make mistakes. I've talked about this sort of thing before, but with writing, you're gonna make mistakes. Let yourself make mistakes, okay? Just get over your pride and your ego and accept the fact that you're gonna mess up a little bit. But it's okay to mess up a little bit, because it's when you make mistakes that you're able to find them and fix them and then do better next time. So that's all the tips that I have. I'm sure there are others. You can like look those up yourself, but those are some basic things that I was able to come up with just kind of real quick about dialogue. So good luck. Practice with writing dialogue. It takes practice. All kinds of writing takes practice to get the hang of. But thank you for sticking around this long. I hope to see you again, and have a good day. Bye bye.